The candlelight made shadows jump across the white tablecloth like small, nervous animals. I watched my son Mark adjust his tie, silk, expensive, the kind his father never would have bothered with, then raise his wine glass like the room belonged to him. 30 faces turned toward him in the Lakeview Inn, the same dining room where I'd served countless birthday dinners, anniversary celebrations, and business meetings. The floorboards creaked in all the familiar places as people shifted in their chairs. After 40 years, I could tell who moved without even looking. "To my mother," Mark said, his voice smooth and polished, the tone he used when closing deals. "Catherine Wells, who has given 40 years of her life to this place." Polite applause filled the room. I kept my hands folded in my lap and watched him closely. At 43, he had his father's broad shoulders, but none of his father's gentle manner. Tom used to speak like he was placing something precious on the table. Mark spoke like he was placing a contract. At table 6, the men in expensive suits leaned forward slightly. Mark's investors. They looked hungry, not for cake, not for celebration, for something else. Then Mark smiled wider. "This," he said, lifting his glass higher, "is the last time we'll celebrate together." The room went still. A fork stopped halfway to someone's mouth. A wine glass hovered in mid-air. Even the candles felt quieter. I smiled at my son, steady and calm, because I'd been waiting for him to say exactly those words. "Well," I said, standing slowly. My napkin slid to the floor like it had been cut loose. "Since we're all here, I have an announcement too." Mark's smile twitched, just for a second. But before I continued, I raised one finger. "To understand what I'm about to tell you," I said, letting my voice carry, "you'd need to know what happened 2 weeks ago." And in my mind, the dining room faded away. 2 weeks earlier, the tea in my cup had gone cold. I didn't mind. My days were always full. Biscuits at dawn, laundry by mid-morning, checking that the Phillips boys shoveled the walkways properly, reminding myself that the inn still breathed because I did. Lily sat across from me in the sunroom, picking at a blueberry scone I'd baked that morning. She always picked at food when something was bothering her. My granddaughter had her father's dark hair, but her grandfather's honest eyes that couldn't hide much, even when she tried. "Grandma," she said softly, not looking at me, "Dad's been saying, maybe you should think about slowing down." "Slowing down from what?" I asked. Outside the window, the lake stretched gray and flat under the March sky. A loon called from the far shore, lonely and haunting, the kind of sound that made visitors stop and listen. The Lakeview Inn had been built right here for that view. Tom's grandfather believed city folks would pay good money to hear loons and eat fresh-caught fish. He'd been right. Lily's spoon clinked against her teacup. "He says the inn needs a fresh start, that you've been carrying it all alone since Grandpa died." Tom had been gone 3 years, a heart attack while splitting wood behind the carriage house, gone before the ambulance could wind its way up the long gravel drive. I'd found him peaceful beside the maple logs, his flannel shirt dusted with sawdust. "Your father used to help here. Remember summers when you were little? He carried luggage and showed guests where to park." "I remember, but Dad says that was different. He says now it's too much for one person." I watched her face, the way she pressed her lips together when something was bothering her. That was her mother's habit. Julie had been gone from Mark's life for 2 years now, another woman who couldn't keep up, as he liked to say, like love was a race. "What else does your father say?" I asked. Color rose in Lily's cheeks. "He says he doesn't think you'll be here much longer." Outside, a pickup truck crunched up the driveway. Firewood delivery most likely, or a repairman. The inn going about its business the way it had for decades, the way it would for decades more if I had anything to say about it. That night, I heard voices on the back porch. Voices that didn't belong to any overnight guests. I knew every guest car, and guests didn't use the family entrance. I'd been in the kitchen putting away the last of the dinner dishes when the murmur drifted through the screen door. "In a month, she'll be out. and the papers will be signed. Mark's voice, low and confident. I set down the dish towel and stepped closer, keeping to the shadows. A woman's voice answered, sharp, impatient. Good, the developers want to break ground by summer. Permits are lined up. Trust me, Sarah. My mother thinks I'm saving her from property taxes. She'll sign anything I put in front of her. My bare foot found the loose floorboard Tom always meant to fix. It creaked, small, but loud enough to freeze my breath. I didn't move. What about the historic designation? The woman asked. The town council's been making noise. Mark laughed, cold as lake water in March. The town council doesn't have real power. Besides, once the inn's gone, there's nothing left to protect. My heart hammered like a trapped bird. Through the window I saw their silhouettes. Mark in pressed khakis, gesturing with his phone. The woman, blonde hair catching the porch light, leaning on the railing like she was already measuring my home. "What about your daughter?" asked the woman. "Lily?" Mark's voice turned dismissive. "She's 25 and works at a non-profit. What's she going to do?" They talked about timelines, contracts, transition costs, business words that turned my home into numbers. When their footsteps finally moved away toward the front of the inn, I stayed in the kitchen with one hand gripping the counter. The grandfather clock chimed 11 times, and for the first time in 40 years, I felt like a stranger in my own house. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with chamomile tea that got cold while moonlight painted a silver path across the lake. I could confront Mark in the morning, demand answers, but I knew my son. He'd smile, he'd tell me I misunderstood, he'd soften his voice and suggest a doctor like I was confused and fragile. No, you don't beat a snake by poking it with a stick. You beat it by planning 3 steps ahead. And by the time the sun rose over the lake, I knew exactly what I had to do. Because if Mark thought I'd sign anything he put in front of me, he was about to learn what his mother could do with a pen. By the time the sun rose over the lake, I hadn't slept at all. The sky turned from black to gray, then to a soft blue that reflected off the water like a promise. The loons were quiet that morning, as if even they were waiting to see what I would do next. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I'd already forgotten to drink. The house settled around me with its familiar sounds, the furnace clicking on, the refrigerator humming, the loose board upstairs groaning as one of the early guests walked to the bathroom. Sounds that said home. Sounds that said mine. I could march straight into Mark's face and demand answers, ask him how he could stand on my porch and talk about my life like it was already over. But I knew my son. He would smile that smooth smile, tell me I misunderstood, say he was only trying to help, maybe even suggest I was tired or confused. No, you don't beat someone like Mark by being loud. You beat him by being prepared. At exactly 8:30, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't needed to call urgently in years. "Benson and Wright," a familiar voice answered. "This is Catherine Wells," I said. "I need to speak to Harold today." There was a pause. Then, "One moment, Mrs. Wells." Harold Benson had handled the inn's legal work since before Mark was born, back when lawyers kept files in metal cabinets and returned calls the same day. "Catherine," Harold said when he came on the line. His voice carried concern. "Susan says you sound upset. Everything all right?" "No," I said plainly. "And I need to see you this morning. I need you to bring everything you have on the inn. Deeds, tax records, all of it." Another pause. "Can you tell me what this is about?" I looked out the kitchen window just in time to see Mark's car turn into the driveway, right on schedule. He'd been stopping by every few days lately, always with an excuse. "Someone's trying to steal my home," I said, "and I'm not going to let them." "I'll see you at 10, Harold said. No questions, no doubt. Mark let himself in through the front door like he owned the place, which I suppose he thought he did. "Morning, Mom," he kissed my cheek, the same quick peck he'd given me since high school. His cologne was expensive, woody and sharp.
It probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. "How are you feeling?" he asked. There it was, that careful tone, like I was made of glass. "Fine as ever," I said. "Coffee's fresh." He poured himself a cup, adding cream. Tom used to drink his coffee black, said cream was for people who didn't actually like coffee. Mark never learned that lesson. "I've been thinking," Mark said, leaning against the counter, "about the future of this place." "We didn't discuss anything," I said calmly. "You talked. I listened." He smiled, that practiced smile. "You're right. That's why I'm here now." I watched him over the rim of my mug. He had his father's height, but none of his stillness. Mark was always moving, checking his watch, tapping his phone, shifting his weight. Energy without purpose. "The thing is, Mom," he continued, "this place is getting to be too much for you. The maintenance costs alone are none of your business," I said. "But they are," he replied smoothly. "When you're gone, I'll inherit this place, and frankly, I can't afford to keep it running. Property taxes have tripled, heating bills, staff." "When you're gone," I repeated. "You planning my funeral already?" "That's not what I meant," he said quickly, though his flushed face told a different story. "I'm trying to be practical. The smart thing would be to sell now while the market's good. You could buy a nice condo in town, something manageable, travel a little." Travel. As if I wanted to spend my remaining years living in someone else's idea of comfort. "I'll think about it," I said. His face brightened instantly. "Really?" I said I'd think about it. After he left, I grabbed my purse and headed to town. Harold Benson's office smelled like old leather and coffee that had been sitting too long. He spread the inn's documents across his desk like a deck of cards. "Everything's in order," he said after a while. "You own the Lakeview Inn free and clear." "That's what I thought," I said, opening my notebook. "Now tell me about historic designation." His eyebrows lifted. "Historic designation?" "My granddaughter explained the basics. I need the legal side. What happens if the inn is protected?" Harold leaned back in his chair. "It complicates things. Depending on the level, demolition could be restricted or impossible. Developers avoid properties like that." "Good," I said. "That's exactly what I want." He studied me carefully. "Catherine, what's really going on?" So I told him everything. The porch conversation, the woman named Sarah, Mark's confidence I'd sign anything he put in front of me. When I finished, Harold nodded slowly. "You want to make the property unsellable to developers. I want to make sure this inn stays an inn long after I'm gone. There is another option, a heritage trust." "A trust?" "You'd transfer ownership into an irrevocable trust. You'd keep lifetime rights, but the property could never be developed or torn down. You choose the beneficiary." I thought of Lily, her love for old buildings, her summers spent setting tables and arranging flowers here. "The beneficiary wouldn't have to be my son," I said. "No," Harold said gently. "It wouldn't." "How long does it take?" "A few weeks if we move fast, but once it's done, it can't be undone." I smiled for the first time that day. "Good," I said. "Let's move fast." That afternoon, I drove to town hall and picked up the historic designation forms. Thick, complicated, beautiful. As I walked back to my car, papers tucked under my arm, I felt something I hadn't felt since Tom died. Not fear, not sadness, clarity. Mark thought this was already over. He was wrong. It was only just beginning. That evening, Lily called. Her voice carried that careful tone she used when she already knew the answer but needed to hear it out loud. "Grandma," she said, "I've been thinking about our conversation today, about your friend who wants to protect an old building." I smiled to myself. Lily had always been too smart for gentle lies. "This friend," she continued, "wouldn't happen to live at a certain lakeside inn, would she?" I sighed. "You always did inherit your grandfather's instincts." There was a pause. Then, softer, "Dad's been pushing you to sell, hasn't he?" Your father believes he knows what's best for everyone, I said carefully. Not everyone agrees. I definitely don't, Lily replied without hesitation. What can I do to help? That question, simple, honest, meant more to me than she knew. I need you to be my eyes and ears, I told her. Your father doesn't watch what he says around you. She exhaled slowly. To him, I'm just a kid who couldn't make it in the real world. That stung. Mark had always dismissed Lily's work, calling it playing with old buildings, as if preserving history was a hobby instead of a calling. Your work is going to save this place, I said. I need to know everything he's planning. Over the next few days, Lily became my quiet messenger. She told me about Mark's meetings at the marina, how he spread glossy photos of the inn across tables like blueprints, talking about potential and prime lakefront development. He told investors the sale was guaranteed, that it was only a matter of timing. He's got them believing you're a confused old woman, Lily said one evening, her voice tight with anger. One of them even asked if you'd been declared incompetent yet. My grip tightened on the phone. Did your father correct them? Not really, she said. He just laughed. I thought of Mark as a boy, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework while I cooked for guests. How proud he'd been the day he graduated college, the first in Tom's family to earn a degree. When had he learned to see people as obstacles instead of family? There's more, Lily added. He's been asking about your routine. When you wake up, when you sleep, if you forget things. Building a case. Grandma, she whispered, what if he tries to have you declared incompetent? He can try, but he's already too late. The next morning, Mark called with news that made my stomach turn. Mom, he said smoothly, I think we should have you evaluated, just to be safe. Dr. Morrison at the medical center does cognitive assessments. I don't need an assessment. My mind is fine. Of course it is, he said quickly, but having it documented could help with insurance and legal questions down the road. Legal questions. There it was. I'll think about it, I said. The same words I'd been giving him for weeks. But this time, I already had a plan. That afternoon, I called Dr. Brennan. George Brennan had been my physician for over 20 years. He'd seen me through grief, illness, and more than a few sleepless nights. You want a full cognitive evaluation? He asked after I explained. I want proof that my mind is sound in case someone says otherwise. There was a brief pause. I understand, he said gently. Come in tomorrow. I also called Harold. I want something added to my will, I told him. If anyone ever challenges my mental competency, I want this evaluation on record. Smart thinking, very smart. Mark had taught me that lesson himself years ago. Plan ahead, think through every angle. I doubted he expected me to use it against him. The evaluation went exactly as I hoped. Clear answers, strong memory, steady hands, blood pressure that made Dr. Brennan laugh. Catherine, he said, signing the form, you're sharper than most people half your age. Whoever suggested this doesn't know you very well. My son is concerned, I said quietly. Dr. Brennan's pen paused. He'd known Mark since he was a child. I see, he said. Well, you can tell your son that in my professional opinion, you are fully capable of managing your own affairs. I tucked the letter into my purse like armor. That afternoon, Mark called again, this time practically glowing. Mom, great news. I found a buyer. Cash offer, no inspection, 20% over market value. The greed in his voice was thick as to taste. That's very generous, I said. They want to move fast, like next week fast. Next week, I repeated. These developers are serious, he said. They've got projects all around the lake. Developers? I asked. Luxury condos, high-end rentals. It'll boost the local economy. The local economy, as if tearing down a 100-year-old inn was a public service. I'll think about it, I said. After we hung up, I stood at the window watching a pair of loons drift near the dock. They'd been coming here longer than the inn had existed, longer than any deed or contract. They knew this place belonged to them. So did I. I called Lily. "They're speeding up," I told her. "Next week." "The trust isn't finalized yet," she said. "I know, which means we move faster too." "What do you need me to do?" "Find out who these investors are. Names, companies, everything." Consider done. When I hung up, I felt something shift inside me. The fear was gone. In its place was focus. Mark thought this was about money, but it was never about money. It was about truth, and soon everyone would see it.
That evening, Mark stopped by unannounced. I knew it was him the moment his car tires crunched up the gravel drive. He always parked too close to the porch, like he was afraid someone else might claim the space. He came in carrying a bottle of wine and a thick folder tucked under his arm. "I thought we could celebrate," he said, setting both on the kitchen table, "and maybe go over some paperwork, just so you know what to expect." The wine was expensive. French. The label looked fancy enough to make people nervous about opening it. Tom would have laughed and poured it anyway. The folder, though, that made my stomach tighten. I dried my hands and took a seat across from him. "You've been busy," I said as he slid the papers toward me. "I wanted to be prepared," he replied smoothly. "You know how deals fall apart if you hesitate." I flipped through the stack slowly, pretending to read. Purchase agreements, disclosure forms, title transfer documents, everything needed to sell the inn except one thing: my signature. Mark watched me the way a cat watches a mouse hole, still, focused, confident the moment would come. "The closing is scheduled for Friday," he said casually. "Johnson and Associates downtown. Very routine. Shouldn't take more than an hour." "Friday?" I repeated. "That's fast." "They're motivated buyers," he said. "And Mom, this is our chance. You could buy a nice place in town, that new senior community near the medical center. Activities, neighbors, people to look after you." People to look after me, as if I were a houseplant that needed watering twice a week. "It sounds wonderful," I said, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I meant it. Wonderful for him. The next morning, Lily called while I was making breakfast for the guests. The Hendersons from Boston were staying another night. Mrs. Blake had her easel set up by the window, painting the lake the way she did every spring. "I found them," Lily said, without greeting. Her voice was tight with anger. "Clearwater Development Group." My hand paused mid-pancake flip. "Tell me." "They're the ones who tore down the Morrison farmhouse last year, the one everyone begged them to preserve." I watched the pancake land perfectly golden in the pan. "The company's registered to James Kirkland," Lily continued. I felt a chill. "And Sarah?" "Sarah Kirkland, his wife, business partner." Lily took a breath. "And Grandma, they've got 3 other properties under contract around the lake, all sold by family members who claimed the maintenance was too much." I slid bacon onto a plate. "Anything else?" I asked. "Yes," Lily said. "I called the town planning office. Clearwater has been working with someone local, someone who's been pointing them toward properties." Someone local. We both knew the answer. After breakfast, I drove straight into town to see Harold. His secretary didn't make me wait this time. She ushered me right in, her expression serious. "The trust documents are ready," Harold said, pulling a folder from his desk drawer. "I've reviewed them 3 times." He laid everything out carefully, explaining each page. "Once you sign, the inn becomes property of the Catherine Wells Heritage Trust. You'll have lifetime rights, but no one can sell it, develop it, or tear it down. Lily will be the successor trustee." "And if someone tries?" I asked. "They'll be in serious legal trouble," Harold said. "Federal level."
I picked up the pen. "What if I've already signed something else?" I asked lightly. Harold's eyebrows pulled together. "What kind of something else?" "A sale agreement, hypothetically." "Catherine," he said firmly, "you can't sell property you don't own. Once the trust is executed, any prior agreement becomes worthless. Whoever claimed otherwise would be the one in trouble." I signed. Each stroke of my name felt like reclaiming ground someone had tried to steal. That afternoon, Mark called, barely containing himself. "Mom, incredible news. The buyers want to meet you tomorrow. Just a quick introduction. Then we sign Friday, like planned." "They want to meet me?" I asked. "It's a courtesy. Big sale like this. Very professional people." "Professional people who tore down history for profit." "Where?" I asked. "At the inn," he said. "Let them see what they're buying. Around 2? 2 o'clock. That gave me time." "That sounds fine," I said. "Great," Mark replied. "Oh, and maybe tidy up a bit. First impressions matter." Tidy up, as if the photos on the walls, the quilts, the furniture Tom and I had collected over decades were clutter. "I'll make sure everything looks perfect," I said. After we hung up, I called Lily. "They're coming tomorrow," I told her. 2 o'clock. "I'll be there," she said without hesitation, then softer. "Grandma, once you confront them, there's no going back." I looked around the kitchen, the copper pots, my mother's recipe box, the window where Tom had proposed 47 years ago. There was no going back the moment I heard your father planning to sell my life. That night, I didn't make a list of what I would say. I made a list of what I wanted them to understand, the difference between a house and a home, between value and worth, between inheritance and entitlement. By the time I went to bed, I knew exactly how this would end. And tomorrow, the trap would be fully set.
They arrived right on time. A black BMW rolled up the gravel drive like it owned the place, tires crunching louder than necessary. I watched from the dining room window as Mark stepped out first, straightening his tie, confidence pouring off him like cologne. Then the others emerged, a blonde woman in a sharp suit, Sarah, and a tall man with silver hair and a posture that suggested he was used to people moving out of his way, James Kirkland. Clearwater Development. Mark opened the door with a smile that felt rehearsed. "Mom, I'd like you to meet Sarah and James Kirkland." Sarah's handshake was firm, professional. "Mrs. Wells, what a lovely property. You must have wonderful memories here." James didn't wait for pleasantries. He spread rolled-up drawings across my dining room table like he was claiming land. "We're very excited about this project," he said. "The plans are quite spectacular." I looked down. Where my inn stood, they had drawn glass and steel condos rising from the lakeshore, a marina replacing the old dock, parking lots where Tom's vegetable garden once grew. "Demolition starts Monday," James added cheerfully. "Crews are lined up, permits approved." Monday, 3 days after the scheduled closing. Sarah nodded. "We've done our homework. The architectural survey shows no historic value. That makes everything much simpler." No historic value? I thought of my application sitting in a clerk's inbox at Town Hall. "The best part," Mark added proudly, "is how fast everything can move once the papers are signed tomorrow. By summer, this whole area will be transformed." Transformed. I stared at the drawings until the lines blurred. "Mrs. Wells?" Sarah asked gently. "Do you have any questions?" I looked up and smiled. "Actually, yes, I do. Just one." All three leaned in. "Tomorrow is my 74th birthday. I'm having a small celebration here at the inn. Family, friends, nothing fancy." Mark's face lit up. "I'd love for you both to join us," I said. 7 o'clock, dinner in the dining room. Sarah and James exchanged a glance. "That's very thoughtful," Sarah said. "A perfect way to mark the transition," James added. Beamed like I'd just handed him the keys. "Mom, that's a wonderful idea," he said. "A real celebration." After they left, I sat alone at the dining room table, staring at the drawings they'd forgotten to take with them.
Tomorrow night, they would finally understand what kind of celebration this was going to be. The phone rang, Mark, no doubt, wanting to confirm details. I let it ring. Friday morning arrived crisp and bright. The lake sparkled like scattered diamonds. I was up before dawn, same as always, but today felt different. Today felt like the first day of something new. I called the caterer in town, Jenny Morrison. Her mother used to clean rooms at the inn when Jenny was a teenager. "Mrs. Wells, happy birthday. Everything's ready. Prime rib, roasted vegetables, and that chocolate cake you asked for." The chocolate cake had been Tom's favorite. It felt right. At 8:30, Mark called again. "Just confirming everything's set for tonight. The Kirklands are really looking forward to it." "I'm sure they are," I replied. "And tomorrow morning," he added, "we meet at Johnson & Associates at 10 sharp. Shouldn't take more than an hour." I watched Mrs. Blake load her easel into her car, 3 new watercolors tucked safely inside. She'd been coming here every spring for 15 years, always the same room, always the same view. "I'll see you tonight," I said. By 5 o'clock, the dining room was transformed. White tablecloths, the good china, candles in the silver holders that once belonged to Tom's grandmother. The smell of prime rib filled the air. Lily arrived early, nervous but determined. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Like a woman about to have the best birthday of her life," I said, hugging her tight. Guests began arriving at 7. Old friends, neighbors, Dr. Brennan and his wife, Harold Benson carrying a wrapped gift. And then, right on time, Mark walked in with Sarah and James. "Happy birthday, Mom," Mark said, handing me roses. Sarah offered a small jewelry box, just a little something to commemorate the day. I set the gifts aside, unopened. By 8:30, 30 guests were seated. Laughter filled the room. Silverware clinked, candles flickered. Mark kept checking his watch. The irony was delicious. At 8 o'clock, I stood and tapped my spoon against my glass. The room quieted. "Thank you all for being here," I said. "Birthdays at my age aren't about counting years. They're about honoring what truly matters." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Then Mark stood. "Before you continue, Mom," he lifted his glass, "I'd like to say something." I nodded graciously. "Of course, dear." He smiled that confident smile. "To my mother, Catherine Wells, who has given 40 years of her life to this place." The room waited. "This," he finished, "is the last time we'll celebrate together." The silence returned. I smiled. And this time, it was my turn. They arrived right on time. A black BMW rolled up the gravel drive like it owns the place, tires crunching louder than necessary. I watched from the dining room window as Mark stepped out first, straightening his tie, confidence pouring off him like cologne. Then the others emerged. A blonde woman in a sharp suit, Sarah, and a tall man with silver hair and a posture that suggested he was used to people moving out of his way, James Kirkland. Clearwater Development. Mark opened the door with a smile that felt rehearsed. "Mom, I'd like you to meet Sarah and James Kirkland." Sarah's handshake was firm, professional. "Mrs. Wells, what a lovely property. You must have wonderful memories here." James didn't wait for pleasantries. He spread rolled-up drawings across my dining room table like he was claiming land. "We're very excited about this project," he said. "The plans are quite spectacular." I looked down. Where my inn stood, they had drawn glass and steel condos rising from the lakeshore, a marina replacing the old dock, parking lots where Tom's vegetable garden once grew. "Demolition starts Monday," James added cheerfully. "Crews are lined up, permits approved." Monday. 3 days after the scheduled closing. Sarah nodded. "We've done our homework. The architectural survey shows no historic value. That makes everything much simpler." No historic value? I thought of my application sitting in a clerk's inbox at Town Hall. "The best part," Mark added proudly, "is how fast everything can move once the papers are signed tomorrow. By summer, this whole area will be transformed." Transformed. I stared at the drawings until the lines blurred. Mrs. Wells, Sarah asked gently, do you have any questions? I looked up and smiled. Actually, yes, just one. All three leaned in. Tomorrow is my 74th birthday. I'm having a small celebration here at the inn. Family, friends, nothing fancy. Mark's face lit up. I'd love for you both to join us, I said. 7 o'clock. Dinner in the dining room. Sarah and James exchanged a glance. That's very thoughtful, Sarah said. A perfect way to mark the transition, James added. Mark beamed like I just handed him the keys. Mom, that's a wonderful idea. A real celebration. After they left, I sat alone at the dining room table, staring at the drawings they'd forgotten to take with them. Tomorrow night, they would finally understand what kind of celebration this was going to be. The phone rang. Mark, no doubt, wanting to confirm details. I let it ring. Friday morning arrived crisp and bright. The lake sparkled like scattered diamonds. I was up before dawn, same as always, but today felt different. Today felt like the first day of something new. I called the caterer in town, Jenny Morrison. Her mother used to clean rooms at the inn when Jenny was a teenager. Mrs. Wells, happy birthday. Everything's ready. Prime rib, roasted vegetables, and that chocolate cake you asked for. The chocolate cake had been Tom's favorite. It felt right. At 8:30, Mark called again. Just confirming everything's set for tonight. The Kirklands are really looking forward to it. I'm sure they are, I replied. And tomorrow morning, he added, we meet at Johnson & Associates at 10 sharp. Shouldn't take more than an hour. I watched Mrs. Blake load her easel into her car, 3 new watercolors tucked safely inside. She'd been here every spring for 15 years, always the same room, always the same view. I'll see you tonight, I said. By 5 o'clock, the dining room was transformed. White tablecloths, the good china, candles and the silver holders that once belonged to Tom's grandmother. The smell of prime rib filled the air. Lily arrived early, nervous but determined. How are you feeling? She asked. Like a wine about to have the best birthday of her life, I said, hugging her tight. Guests began arriving at 7. Old friends, neighbors, Dr. Brennan and his wife, Harold Benson carrying a wrapped gift. And then, right on time, Mark walked in with Sarah and James. Happy birthday, Mom, Mark handed me roses. Sarah offered a small jewelry box, just a little something to commemorate the day. I set the gifts aside, unopened. By 7:30, 30 guests were seated. Laughter filled the room. Silverware clinked, candles flickered. Mark kept checking his watch. The irony was delicious. At 8 o'clock, I stood and tapped my spoon against my glass. The room quieted. Thank you all for being here, I said. Birthdays at my age aren't about counting years, they're about honoring what truly matters. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Then Mark stood. Before you continue, Mom, he lifted his glass, I'd like to say something. I nodded graciously. Of course, dear. He smiled that confident smile. To my mother, Catherine Wells, who has given 40 years of her life to this place. The room waited. This, he finished, is the last time we'll celebrate together. The silence returned. I smiled, and this time, it was my turn. For a moment after the door slammed shut behind Mark, no one spoke. Then someone laughed, soft, uncertain. Another guest cleared their throat. Plates shifted, glasses clinked again. Life, stubborn and familiar, returned to the room. The Hendersons leaned toward me, eyes wide with disbelief. Mrs. Blake pressed her hand to her chest like she was trying to slow her heart. Well, Harold said lightly, settling back into his chair, that was one memorable birthday dinner. The room broke into laughter. I let myself sit down slowly, the weight of the evening finally settling into my bones. My hands trembled just a little, not from fear, but from release. Lily came to my side and wrapped her arms around me. I can't believe you did that, she whispered. I can, I said softly. You just never knew I could. Dinner resumed, though no one cared much about the food anymore. People wanted the story, how I found out, how long I'd known, how I managed to stay quiet for so long. I told them pieces, enough to satisfy curiosity, not enough to turn my life into gossip. What mattered wasn't the drama. What mattered was the truth. By the time dessert was served, the chocolate cake sliced and shared, the tension had completely drained away. Laughter filled the room again, real laughter this time, the kind that comes when something heavy has been lifted. "To Catherine," someone called from the back, raising a glass, "for reminding us that age doesn't mean weakness." I raised my glass in return, feeling warmth spread through me, not from the champagne, but from the people who had shown up, the ones who knew the end not as property, but as memory. One by one, guests began to leave. The Hendersons thanked me for an unforgettable evening. Mrs. Blake hugged me and promised to send a watercolor of the moonlit lake. Dr. Brennan squeezed my hand. "You did exactly the right thing." Harold lingered last, slipping his wrapped gift into my hands. "Open it later," he said. "It's for celebrating." When the dining room finally emptied, only Lily and I remained. Candle stubs flickered low, casting long shadows across the table. "I kept waiting for you to feel bad, to second-guess yourself." I looked around the room, the carved wood, the worn floor, the windows that held decades of sunsets. "I don't," I said. "I feel clear." She nodded slowly. "Dad will be furious." "I know." "He might not forgive you." I met her eyes. "Some things don't need forgiveness. They need boundaries." We cleaned up together, moving in comfortable silence. When the last dish was put away and the lights dimmed, Lily hugged me again. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Good, because this place will be yours one day, and I want you to protect it the way you protected me." Outside, the lake lay dark and still. A loon called from the far shore, low, steady, answered by another in the distance. After Lily left, I stepped out to the back porch with a cup of tea and Harold's wrapped gift, a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for something special. I poured a glass and sat in the chair where Tom used to sit, watching the water change with the light. "We did it," I said quietly to the night. "Nobody's taking our home." The lake didn't answer. It didn't need to. Somewhere across the water, the loons called again, voices that knew where they belonged. And so did I. The days after the party were strangely quiet. No phone calls from Mark, no sudden visits, no excuses about paperwork or just checking in. The silence felt heavy at first, like waiting for a storm that might still come back around. But slowly, I realized something. The storm had passed. On Monday morning, the day James Kirkland had bragged about starting demolition, I woke before dawn and walked down to the lake. The air was cool, the water calm. No trucks, no crews, no strangers measuring the land like it was already gone. Just the inn, standing exactly where it always had. By mid-morning, word had spread. Neighbors stopped by under the pretense of dropping off bread or asking about reservations, but really they wanted to look me in the eye and say, "We're glad you won." One woman took my hand and said, "My parents lost their place last year. I wish they'd had your strength." That stayed with me. Lily came by in the afternoon, a stack of papers tucked under her arm. "The town called," she said, smiling. "They've fast-tracked the historic review. Apparently, the commission was already uneasy about Clearwater." I nodded. People don't like seeing their memories turned into parking lots. She laughed softly, then grew serious. "Dad left me a message," she said. "He's angry, mostly at you, a little at me." "I expected that," I replied. "He said you humiliated him." I met her gaze. No, he humiliated himself. I just refused to lie about it. Lily was quiet for a moment. I think he finally sees that he lost," she said. I looked around the dining room, sunlight pouring in through the windows. "I think he didn't lose everything," I said. "He lost control. That's different." That evening, I sat at the desk in the small office behind the front desk, the one Tom built with his own hands. I opened the ledger and wrote a simple note on the first page. The Lakeview Inn remains what it has always been, a place for people, not profit. It felt important to put that into words, to leave a record. Weeks passed. The trust finalized, the historic designation moved forward. Clearwater development disappeared from the conversation around town like a bad dream people didn't want to revisit. Mark sent one email, short, cold. "I hope you're happy." I read it once, then deleted it. Happiness, I had learned, doesn't come from winning. It comes from standing where you belong and refusing to be moved. One evening, Lily and I sat on the porch watching the sun sink into the lake. "You know," she said, "people think revenge is about hurting someone back." I smiled. "It isn't. It's about protecting what matters," she finished. "Yes, and letting the truth do the rest." The loons called again, their voices carrying across the water like a promise passed down through time. Some things endure: homes, memories, and the quiet strength of knowing when to say no. And that, I realized, was the real victory. After the applause faded and the doors finally closed behind Mark and the Kirklands, the inn felt different. Not quieter, not emptier, just lighter. Like a storm had passed through and taken something heavy with it. People stayed longer than planned that night. They didn't rush for coats or check watches. They leaned closer to one another, voices softer now, as if something sacred had just happened and no one wanted to break the spell. They asked questions, gentle ones, careful ones. "How long did you know? Were you scared? How did you keep so calm?" I answered what I could, but the truth was simpler than any explanation. I wasn't calm because I wasn't afraid. I was calm because the fear had already done its worst. The betrayal had already happened weeks ago in the shadows, on my back porch, when my son spoke about my life as if it were already over. Everything after that was just the echo. People think the hardest moment is the confrontation. It's not. The hardest moment is the knowing. Knowing that someone you raised, someone you loved, looked at you and decided you were expendable. That moment had already passed. So standing there, envelope in my hands, my voice steady, I wasn't breaking. I was finished breaking. Eventually, guests began to leave one by one. They hugged me longer than usual. Some whispered, "You're stronger than you know." Others simply squeezed my hand, eyes shining, saying nothing at all. Lily stayed close the whole time, moving quietly, helping clear plates, straightening chairs, grounding herself in motion the way I always had. When the last guest finally left and the inn settled into silence, she sat across from me at the long dining table. The candles had burned low, wax pooled like small white rivers at their base. She looked at me as if she was seeing me for the first time. "Grandma," she said softly, "I didn't know you had that in you." I smiled. "Neither did your father." That truth sat between us, heavy but honest. "What happens now?" she asked. Outside, the lake reflected the moon, calm and patient. The loons called once, then went quiet, as if listening. "Now," I said, "we live." The next morning, the fallout began. Phones rang, emails arrived, whispers moved through town faster than the spring wind. Clearwater Development tried to bluster, then threaten, then quietly disappear when lawyers started asking questions they couldn't answer. Harold handled everything with calm precision. He called me twice a day for a week, updating me on letters sent, claims dismissed, and legal threats that fell apart the moment they were examined. "There's nothing they can do," he said during one call. "They built their case on lies. Courts don't like that." Neither do mothers, I thought. Mark didn't call. Not that day. Not the next. Not the one after that. When he finally did, a full week later, I let the phone ring. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Some conversations don't move you forward, they pull you backward, and I had no intention of stepping into that space again. Instead, I focused on what remained. The inn filled again with guests. Word spread, not just about the confrontation, but about the place itself. People came curious, they left touched. One couple told me they chose the inn because it felt like it had a soul. That made me laugh. Another guest, an older woman traveling alone, stayed 3 nights longer than planned. On her last morning, she hugged me and said, "Watching you stand up for yourself reminded me I still can." That was worth more than any offer Mark ever brought me. Lily stayed close longer too. She took time off work, saying it was temporary, but I saw the way she studied the books, the guest logs, the maintenance schedules. She wasn't playing innkeeper. She was preparing. One afternoon, as we walked the property together, she stopped near the old dock. "Grandma," she said, "I didn't know you want me to think I expect anything." I looked at her, really looked at her. The steady eyes, the quiet strength, the respect she carried for things that couldn't be replaced. "I didn't give it to you because you're family," I said. "I gave it to you because you understand what this place is." She swallowed hard. "I won't fail you," she said. I believed her. Mark came by once, not to talk, not to apologize, just to pick up a box of old things from the carriage house, childhood trophies, some books, a framed photo of him and Tom fishing when he was 12. He didn't meet my eyes. "You didn't have to humiliate me," he muttered. I leaned against the doorframe, calm. "You humiliated yourself," I said. "I just stopped protecting you from the truth." He flinched, like a boy again. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the child I once tucked into bed after long summer days, the one who laughed easily, the one who loved this place before he learned to measure everything by value. But then his jaw tightened. "You chose Lily over me," he said. I shook my head. "No, Mark. I chose the inn over someone who was willing to destroy it." He left without another word. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because some grief is quiet. It settles in slowly, like dust, and becomes part of the air you breathe. Life moved forward. The inn stood, the lake remained, and I learned something important in the aftermath of betrayal. Not everything broken needs to be repaired. Some things are meant to be released, because what truly belongs to you, your home, your story, your dignity, stays, no matter who walks away. On quiet mornings now, I still wake before dawn. Old habits don't disappear just because the world changes. I rise before the guests stir, before the birds fully wake, before the lake decides what color it wants to be that day. I make coffee the way Tom liked it, strong, black, no cream, and sit by the window that faces the water. The lake stretches wide and calm, holding the sky like a secret. Some mornings it's silver, some mornings it's blue, some mornings it's gray and thoughtful, but it's always there, just like the inn. People ask me questions now, more than they used to. Strangers, guests, even people passing through town who've heard the story secondhand. They ask if I regret it. They ask if it was worth losing my son. They ask if standing my ground cost me more than it gave me. I always pause before answering, not because I don't know, but because the truth deserves space. Some things are not meant to be handed over quietly. This inn was never just a building. It was never just square footage or lakefront value or a line item on a spreadsheet. It was every early morning I spent kneading dough while the sun rose over the water. Every tired smile I gave a guest who arrived late and cold. Every celebration, every goodbye, Every moment that happened within these walls when no one thought it mattered. But it did. It all mattered. Mark thought ownership came from paperwork. He thought control came from signatures and deadlines and pressure dressed up as concern. He thought love was something you could inherit by default. He was wrong. Ownership comes from showing up when it's inconvenient, from fixing what breaks instead of replacing it, from staying when it would be easier to walk away, from caring about something long after the excitement fades. That's not something you can rush. That's not something you can fake. That's not something you can take from someone who refuses to give it up. I didn't win because I was clever. I didn't win because I had better lawyers. I didn't even win because I planned carefully. I won because I knew who I was, and I refused to let someone else tell me my story was over. There's a quiet cruelty in the way people treat aging. They speak softly, smile kindly, and slowly move you toward the edge of your own life. They tell you it's for your comfort, for your safety, for your own good. But what they really mean is, you're in the way. That's what Mark believed. He looked at me and saw an obstacle. Lily looked at me and saw a foundation. That's the difference. She walks the halls now with confidence, already learning the rhythm of the place. She notices the small things, the way the floor creaks near the stairs, the way guests pause at the window before speaking, the way memories live in quiet corners. She doesn't talk about maximizing potential. She talks about protecting what already exists. That's how legacies survive, not through control, through care. I don't know if Mark will ever understand that. I don't know if time will soften him or harden him further. That part is no longer mine to manage. And that's another lesson people don't talk about enough. You are not responsible for fixing someone who chose to harm you. You are not required to sacrifice yourself to prove your love. You are allowed to draw a line, even with family, especially with family. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a grand moment. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't arrive with apologies or reconciliation or tears. Sometimes forgiveness is simply letting go of the need for someone else to become who you hoped they would be. I've done that. The inn is quiet again now, in the best way. The kind of quiet that feels earned. The kind that lets you hear yourself think. The kind that reminds you why you stayed in the first place. At night, when the guests are asleep and the lake turns black and still, I sit on the back porch and listen. The loons call to each other across the water, voices steady and sure. They've been doing that longer than the inn has existed, longer than any of us. They know where they belong. So do I. If you're listening to this and facing something similar, someone rushing you, pressuring you, telling you that your time is up, hear this clearly. Your age does not erase your authority. Your experience is not a weakness. Your life does not become negotiable just because someone else sees profit in your ending. Move slowly. Ask questions. Trust your instincts. And never let anyone convince you that love requires surrendering your ground. Some chapters don't end because time runs out. They end because someone decides they're finished. And some, the best ones, begin the moment you refuse to be written out. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Protect what you've built. Honor what you've lived. And remember, what's rooted in truth can't be taken, not by pressure, not by greed, and not even by betrayal. Thank you for listening to my story. If it spoke to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe I was too hard on my son? Or did he make his choice long before I made mine? Leave a comment, share your experience, and never forget, your best chapters don't end because someone else says they should. They end when you decide.